Boker Tov, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Excellent. If you're on Zoom, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? If you're on Zoom, you guys are here in the building if you're on Zoom. If everyone can please also just turn off their phones or silence them or mute them or do whatever you need to, just so we can all be fully present for this experience. As a reminder, this is being recorded, so if you would like to see it again, or if your friends can't make it, you can, of course, watch it later. This is our third presentation of 4 presentations trying to ask the question, or answer the question, what makes us human? And in our first session, we had an opportunity to answer that question from the view of neuroscience with Professor Victoria Templer-Rotko. During our second presentation, Peter Salson brought the perspectives from the world of astrophysics. And this morning, we have an opportunity to learn from Professor Dennis Gilbride, who recently retired from his position as professor in the Counseling and Psychology Services Department at Georgia State University in Atlanta. He picked a wonderful weekend to be here. Great. Prior to his position at GSU, he was a professor and department chair at Syracuse University. That explains why the snow didn't bother you this weekend. Yes. This is nothing. His research and teaching includes work on religious issues in counseling, attachment, and disability. His topic this morning is, do psychologists think humans are just machines, computers, animals, or gene expressors? Is there evidence that such things as altruism, freedom, and meaning are real, or just socially constructed strategies that humans evolved to enhance communal living and complex social systems? What do current trends in positive psychology tell us about what it is to be a human and how we should understand concepts such as gratitude? The structure for this morning will be about a 40-minute presentation or so, 45 minutes. Then I'm going to present for about 15 minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A afterwards. We're hoping to wrap up around 12:15, 12:20. Does that make sense to everyone? Is everyone excited? Is everyone ready? We want to give a special acknowledgement that we see our friends who are participating on Zoom from different parts of the country, and we welcome you for joining us on Zoom as well. This program is sponsored by Sinai and Synapses, and also by here at Temple Emanu-El. It's my pleasure to introduce this morning's speaker, Dennis Gilbride.
Hello.
Make sure you're eating the microphone is the best way.
Okay. It's very nice to see you all. I actually participated through that the last time, so I saw the speakers, but I didn't get to see you. So it's and heard your voices and asking questions. So it's very nice to see the people that are here coming out on it's not quite snowy, but winter's day. This is the third, as the rabbi said. This is the third of the 3 of us that are doing these Sunday things, and then there's another event. And I think it's important for you to know, and you probably get the sense, that it was a collaborative process. So with the help of Zoom, I participated in discussions that the 3 of us had. What did we want to talk about from our professional experience? How would we approach these same kinds of questions? And we even shared a document together that we wrote about what we're up to. So the good fortune that I have of coming third is that I got to see and hear what everybody else presented, and then I'm going to really tie that into what I'm going to talk about today. So one of the...
Sorry, one second, just move this out of the way for you. There we go, sorry.
One of the first things I want to know is how many of you have been here for all 3? Wow. So my wife said that, but we were, in Atlanta. But we're on Zoom. That's true for the Zoom people. We don't get to see the hands from the Zoom people, but they count too. So that's good. So you'll recognize some of the issues that we talked about. The big word for all 3 of these presentations has been determinism. has been determinism. So to what extent are we determined the first week in terms of our brains, the second week in terms of the physical universe that we exist in, and then this week it'll be from a psychological perspective. It's supposed to go. Oh, wants me to do it.
It's got a
Here.
mind of its own. It's a joke, folks. It's predetermined. It has autonomy. The joke did much better last week.
I just didn't press it. I just didn't press it hard. So the first question.
Can you enlarge it? Yeah, we can make it bigger.
Is that good? And can you hear me? Yes. Okay. So the first question is, what do psychologists think about free will, choice, agency? What do psychologists think about that? We asked Peter, what do physicists think about that? But we're asking, what do psychologists think about that in this? So the first sort of trick of the whole three is we've already sort of said what we think is human, right? We're saying free will, choice, and agency seem to have something really central to do with what it is to be a human. So we're already sort of setting up the discussion about free will, choice, and agency in contrast to determinism. So the first answer to that is, what do psychologists think about free will, choice, and agency? The same thing that Jews think about everything, right? That 2 Jews, 3 opinions, right? That's just how we do it. 2 weeks ago, when the rabbi was speaking, it was the 10 Commandments weekend. That was the Torah portion was the 10 Commandments, and that the rabbi brought up that even though it's in the Torah, the 10 Commandments is one of the central facts of the Jewish experience. It's the argument for one of the central contributions of Jews to world morality. Nobody could agree on what the people actually heard. The rabbi gave you 4 or 5 different, well, some people heard this, some people heard that, some people heard the whole 10 Commandments, some people heard the Aleph, which doesn't even have any sound, right? So there is a tradition in Judaism that we disagree about everything. But it's more than that, and this is what I want us to start by thinking about with this presentation in particular. With the Talmud does something that's just counter our current culture, and that is they put in everybody's opinion. So it isn't just the winners or the highest status person, it's everybody's opinion. So one of the great, makes the book a lot longer, right? So the Talmud takes up a whole shelf because everybody's opinion gets included, which just isn't something we do now. That if our opinion's right, we just leave the other opinion out. And they also do something else in the Talmud which is remarkable. And that is, if they think they disagree with someone, particularly someone who has status or is of interest, they try to find a way for that person not to be wrong. So instead of saying, this person's just stupid, they just got it wrong, which is how our culture talks about the people that we disagree with, they say, no, this is what they were really talking about. This is how they got it right. So that the Talmud did 2 things that I want us to think about as we go through the list of how psychologists have looked at things. And that is, they put in all the opinions, and they try to find a way that even the people you disagree with aren't just wrong, and we sort of respect that. It's just this brilliant Talmud approach. So this is not a bug of Judaism, it's a feature, and it would be nice if it was a feature of our whole culture. The other thing we need to know about psychologists is that we've always had envy of the empirical sciences, and so like I've seen Peter present a lot, and when he presents on LIGO, and got beautiful pictures, and you see all the numbers, and it's like really cool stuff, and it's like real and strong. And so psychologists have always felt maybe we're a little mushy. We can't really demonstrate what we do. So there's been a push. There's always been this sort of push in psychology to try to make it more empirical, make it more science, make it more science-like. And in fact, this goes right to Freud, who started with the study of neurons. And when his patients, because he was a physician, first came to him, who were depressed, he gave them cocaine. And he gave them cocaine because it made them less depressed. So if Freud would have had Prozac, he might never have discovered the unconscious, because it's like he wanted to help people not be depressed, to help people get better. And so he wasn't just needing to be psychological. He was a physician. He was a scientist. We also see, when we're talking about how psychologists look at the world, that medications have replaced straitjackets, and psychiatry and some psychologists, as we saw in section 1 of these, have moved toward neurology. So a lot of psychology has moved from the business of talking about things like free will, choice, agency, and things we'll talk about later, and moved toward neurology. And then there's this other problem in our field, and that is the funders privilege evidence-based practices. So biology and symptoms, and they've moved away from theory, self-actualization, meaning, and values. So the people who fund good psychological science are only interested in determinism. They're really only interested in determinism. There's really one interesting exception, and probably the largest funder of the non-deterministic science, and that's the Templeton Foundation. So this, I always called it scientists in synagogues, but it's synapses and Sinai and synapses. That's funded by Templeton. In fact, and as we go through toward the end of my presentation today, not almost all, a lot of the research was funded by Templeton. So this person who's funding us getting to be here today, me getting to be here today, this private, wealthy fund person, has probably done the most for studying those other aspects of being human that aren't just deterministic. So we're very lucky, and it's not an accident that here we are being funded by Templeton. So I want to start from the most deterministic. And for those of you who are here, this is a revisit by Mr. Machine. So Mr. Machine, we met him two weeks ago, and he's decided to come back because the psychologists also have this sort of Mr. Machine and determinism. So if you remember, 2 weeks ago, Peter, sitting over there, asked you these 5 questions, right? Or where you fit in terms of on the scale of determinism, from my body does what it does and that's it, all the way to I'm able to figure out what I ought to do and almost always succeed. Does everybody remember seeing this? And does everybody remember kind of giving scores and people that seemed like 3 and 4? Some people didn't like being stuck with those, so they said like 3.5. And so you saw this scale of how deterministic you felt. Very few people, I think, came up with ones who felt they were totally deterministic. When the rabbi, is the rabbi still here?
Yeah, I'm always here.
Oh, you're always here. There he is.
I know when you're sleeping. I know when you're awake.
That's so comforting. So the rabbi and I were talking about this last week. We sort of switched it to a percentage instead of 1, 2, 3, or 4, 5. You know, how much do you feel that you're determined? From not determined at all, you know, little determinism, to maybe or you could talk about it in a more positive way. You know, what freedom do you have? 20%, 30%, 40%. So we could think about it in those terms of numbers. And then the rabbi said something interesting, because we were talking about the difference between genetically us and chimpanzees is only about 1 or 2%. It's only about 1 or 2% difference between us and chimpanzees. But it makes all the difference in who's on which side of the bars when you go to the zoo. So that 1% really is in our favor. So I want to take the most extreme, in this context, example of determinism, and in fact, Freud is often seen as over-deterministic, that there are so many different unconscious factors and drives that are controlling your behavior. You know, you can't even find your way through. If you get on top of one of those, another one. Really, the idea of over-determinism. So we actually said this, right? And it's interesting that the book that this is from, The Future of an Illusion, is required reading, I think, in all religious studies programs in America. So it's like religious studies programs, and here I am in a synagogue with a person who's saying religion is an illusion that hopefully should just go away, what he actually felt. But the line, the famous line, so you probably heard this, but you may or may not have read it. However, psychoanalytic investigation of the individual teaches with a special emphasis that God is, in every case, modeled after the Father, and that our personal relationship to God is dependent upon our relation to our physical Father, fluctuating and changing with him, and that God at bottom is nothing but an exalted Father. Freud didn't use our common psychology speak. Well, it leans toward, the evidence kind of suggests. He knew how to write a sentence, right? And so I think his suggestion was we should take the prayer book, and it should be Baruch Atah, fill in your Father's name. That was sort of his approach. How many of you have heard of this book? How many of you read this book? How many of you still own this book? It's in your... 1, 2? Only 2? But most of you heard of the book, and probably and a lot of you read it. Maybe as part of your undergraduate psychology. Is that where you read it? Undergraduate psychology. They made you read it. So then you sold it back at the end of the semester. It's like, I don't do that. But it's interesting because the million-copy bestseller, popular psychology don't sell 1 million copies anymore. I mean, this was a big deal, and it came after his Walden 2. It's not really showing. Which said similar things. This is the most aggressive way of talking about that we're determined. And he wasn't kidding. He meant this. And I saw him toward the end of his life at a conference, and he went out saying, the best you can do is just try to reorganize the contingencies of reinforcement in your environment to get the outcomes that you want, and we can all do that, and it's like, that's it. So he really meant it. And the New York Times at the bottom says, if you plan to read only one book this year, this is probably the one you should choose. In 1971, the one book you should read is that you are 100% determined, with no freedom and no dignity. So that was what Skinner said. So I want to do a little Talmudic adjustment for Skinner. So Rabbi Aha says to Rabbi Skinner, what do you mean people don't have dignity? We were created in the image of God. How can you say we don't have dignity? And how can you say we don't have freedom? God gave us dignity. So Rabbi Aha says, Rabbi Skinner, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Rabbi Ishmael says, no, you misunderstood. Rabbi Skinner's talking about this boy. And this boy was walking up the stairs to go into his front door, and a snake came out and bit him as he was going in, and he got very, very ill. He got very, very ill. But he survived, this boy. And so from then on, what he did is he would only sort of sneak in to the house in the back door and then go into the house that way. That's who Rabbi Skinner was talking about. That boy. The question and answers, you can come and ask me more about that boy if you want to. It does not like me.
Try the arrows left and right.
We're, can I say that? We're in a suburb of Boston here, so it's, no, I can't say that? This is a whole different state. This is Rhode Island. So, we have mixed feelings about that. Some people say we're a suburb and something. So here's another person from Harvard, E.O. Wilson. And how many people know E.O. Wilson? So a lot of you know E.O. Wilson. He's mostly known for his ants, which he's kind of showing there. But he made his sociobiology really got him a lot of probably mostly negative attention, and also got some people harassing him. But what he did was took his evolutionary psychology or evolutionary biology and applied it to psychology, saying what we're going to hear in a straight evolutionary psychology way is that evolution accounts for all of these factors. Evolutionary psychology, these things we consider human. So gods and religions, in some, are group-level adaptations for producing cohesiveness and trust, like maypoles and beehives. They are created by members of the group, and they organize the activity of the group. So the evolutionary psychologists say that this religious stuff is just a way for us to figure out how to work together and be more efficient at staving off the people that are after us. But there have always been voices, so that was our Mr. Machine, more Mr. Machine voices. There have always been voices that have said, no, there's much more to human beings. So we have William James, I'm sure most of you have heard of William James, wrote important books about the importance of religion. He wrote it in an interesting way, because he said, I don't really take this religion stuff seriously, but all these other people do, and they're not nuts. Which is a big thing to say, because most people today say, well, if you take the religion stuff seriously, you're nuts. And he said, no, they're not nuts. I don't get it, I don't feel it, but they're not nuts. You have Jung, who was very much a Freudian, but then absolutely said there's more to humans. We have this whole deep collective unconscious. So he was pushing a different view of human. You have Rogers and the humanists and Maslow. I think somebody, I believe, likes Maslow in this group. I see him. You have the existentialist who says existence precedes essence. Interesting, the existentialists all talked about radical choice, and the biggest voices were during World War II. You either chose to be part of the resistance or you're a collaborator. And you can talk about social pressure, talk about all your life is at risk. Make your choice. You're a collaborator or you're a resistance. And Viktor Frankl, whose book is here, this is another book some of you might, how many of you have seen this book, Viktor Frankl?
Excuse me.
Yes.
I studied at graduate school in Bowie State.
What's that?
Excuse me. I studied at graduate Bowie State, and my professor was Dr. Henry Raymond.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Great. So, so Frankl talked about the center, and for those of you who don't know, I'll just give you one sentence about Viktor Frankl, and that is, he was a concentration camp survivor, and he's talking about meaning and choice in the worst possible situation in which you're just crushed as a human being, and he said that people were still marching into the camps with the Shema on their lips. And that's what it is to be a human. And of course, psychotherapy is premised on the fact that we have choice and agency and an ability to change. And we see the vision. This slide was from my wife. The client oftentimes sees themselves as very determined, that their genes or their life circumstances means that they are completely shackled and have no choice. And the therapist often says, no, we can help you out of that. Now, I know our tradition here is to kind of keep going, but this is really hard for me as a teacher to not give any chance for feedback or anything for this, because we're gonna rotate into something slightly different. Does anybody have anything they want to say or ask at this point? Just sort of a quick overview of the big names. Yeah.
I thought there should have been a sixth choice before. I know what I should do. I always know what I should do, and seldom or sometimes don't do it. So I thought there should have been a sixth
choice. Okay. So you can edit your slides, Peter.
Next time I give the talk.
Right. How are we doing on time?
Got 15 minutes left.
Okay. So what I want to talk about now is a current emphasis in one part of psychology. Much of it's funded multiple places, but a lot of it's funded by Templeton. A lot of the positive psychology people, and I want us, just before we do the positive psychology people, to review. And Victoria isn't here. Is that still true? I'm not seeing Victoria.
She's on Zoom.
She's on Zoom.
Oh, hi, Victoria. So that's good. So if I got it wrong, she can't really say anything because we got them cut off, right? So hopefully I'll get it right. But this is what I took from her lecture at the end, in my notes, and that is how not to be on autopilot. So her Mr. Machine was autopilot. That are we just on autopilot? And I heard her say 5 things that I thought were really, really interesting and that she documented in her research, and that is serious attention, it is repetition, it's focus, intention, and core values. Now, I expected the first 4 from her, but I was really surprised that her recent research has said, and your values really make a difference. So I was thinking about this list and this event, because what we have here, and the rabbi demanded it because he told you had to turn off your phones, so he wanted serious attention and focus and intention and your core values. And your core values have you choose where you spend your time. Saturday morning, Sunday morning, I don't know where you were Saturday morning, saw some of you yesterday. Sunday morning, you got up and came here, so your values are changing who you are neurologically. That's what I heard her say, that where you put your attention, you're not on autopilot. You have all chosen to be here in this very, very intentional and very, very intentional way. And see why this matters. So, of all the positive psychology variables, and they have some really interesting ones. A lot of them are more Christian-based, and they have a lot on forgiveness, and they have a lot on the major moral positions. But the one that's getting a lot of attention now is gratitude. And in fact, when the Sultans came and visited us, they brought this gratitude board to our house. And where did you buy it, Sarah?
At Stock on Hope Street.
Stock at Hope Street. You can all have your own gratitude board. So I want to talk some about what we know. So now I'm going to sort of switch from theory to being a little more empirical. So what do we know? Gratitude's really good for you. It's really good for you. It's good for you in ways that you would expect it to be good for you, positive emotion in that. But it's also good for you in some really surprising ways. You sleep better. So if you sleep really badly and you have a lot of gratitude, think, wow, it could be much worse. You have greater optimism. You have more connectedness to others. So that's interesting. So this means that this gratitude just isn't narcissism. Look how cool my life is. This is something quite different. This sense of gratitude of, oh, look at that on Friday nights. I don't know if I should say this. I think you might actually be there, my son. The old, I don't know if the current Siddur Sim Shalom on Friday night says, and accepting in humility the blessings that are yours. They have that line along with the blessings of the children. Accepting in humility the blessings that are yours. That's gratitude. Feel loved and cared by others. Better physical health. There's a lot of work on the physical health stuff. It's good for your health. And it buffers against biological threat responses during collaborative teamwork. That when teams get together and they all appreciate what each other does, and then they go into a stressful situation, they physiologically have lower stress responses. This is a good thing. This gratitude thing's a good thing. I want to talk about another specific study, because this is really, really important for something we're going to talk about in a second. A specific study. And what they did is that they randomly assigned people to 2 groups. One group had a daily time when they were reminded to think about something they were grateful for. And another group was, at the same time, was told, think about some of the challenges you have in your life, or some of the things that are the things that we do all the time. Some of the times we're thinking about the things we're happy about, and the things that we're not happy with. But they randomly assign. So any of you who are empiricists or took psychology as an undergraduate or a psychologist, we really, really like random assignment because it gets rid of all those other things. So it gets rid of all the stuff about personality or life history or socioeconomic status and all that. It just means that The groups are divided on this one variable, And what they found is that there's more positive affect, which you would expect, if you're thinking about positive things. But there's also less negative affect, and this is over time, not in that particular moment, but over the course of that week, over the course of that month. If you purposefully try to think about things you're grateful for, then you have less times when you're thinking about the things that you're not so happy about. More time spent exercising. Now that's just bizarre. Why should you have more time spent exercising? But you do. Fewer reported physical symptoms, and then another really very surprising one, you're more likely to help someone else. It makes you a better person in ways that you probably think helping other people is a good thing. Makes you a better person. The top ones are kind of obvious. Positive affect, less negative affect, but helping other people, it takes it to a completely different level. So one of the things that I was thinking, and I wanted to sort of, set the rabbi up on this, is with this group, what we would do is we'd run this experiment in this synagogue. So what we'd do with you guys is we'll assign half of you to come to Minyan every week, and half of you during that same time to watch cable news. And then at the end of a month, we'll see who has more positive affect, who spent more time exercising, who reported fewer physical symptoms, and who were more likely to help someone else. Kind of an interesting thought there. How are we doing, Peter?
5 minutes.
Okay.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Okay, so this is about recognizing gratitude towards others. What about the impact of being aware that other people are grateful for what you have done, for what you do?
That's really interesting. So most of the research is just the person taking this moment and saying, here's the things that I'm appreciative of. That I'm appreciative that I'm alive. I'm appreciative that I have a wonderful wife. That I have wonderful friends, and that have all that. So yours is saying recognizing.
Or hearing people express gratitude towards you.
Right. It's got to be good. I can't pop up any empirical studies. I have a whole list after my slides of studies. That isn't how we tend to frame the questions right now, but it's a really good frame. Yes.
So I noticed, I'm reading Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart, and I noticed that what appears to be funded in this arena is sociological research rather than psychological, but she talks about near enemies, which is comes from Buddhist as opposed to opposite enemies, and I think that what the rabbi is talking about may be a near enemy of gratitude, which is something that comes from the ego as opposed to gratitude from the universe.
I'll bet you that the rabbi's going to address that.
I'll do my best.
So that's an interesting thing. Yes.
The other thing is talking about gratitude here without talking.
I'm going to have to walk back here so I can hear you better.
I'm sorry, I took my mask down. I'm thinking about gratitude here and who are we grateful to?
Right.
And the issue from a religious point of view is, are we grateful, expressing gratitude or thinking or feeling gratitude towards God or some other, how else to put it? Or are we
Extra-human
feeling-
agency.
Okay. Or are we feeling gratitude towards other people?
So I'm going to walk back here so I can.
Can you summarize the question, Dennis?
Yes. It's like you are in the exact right place at the exact right time. because the question was, is there a difference or between addressing gratitude, as I said to my wife when she's a great cook and she makes me dinner, or thanking God that for this food, Rukata,
For the wife who made the food.
What the,
For the wife who makes the food.
and I should thank God. Absolutely, I thank God for making my wife. But your question's really interesting, and it's like I really want to talk more about that. But I think that's where we roll over to the rabbi that he gets to do most of the God talk, and so I'm supposed to keep with the empirical data.
I guess I'm asking, has the research shown anything about difference between gratitude towards other people versus gratitude towards a deity?
That's a fair question that I get to answer when they do that. A lot of this research is done by Christians, and so there does tend to be, for some, there's a whole set of people that know it is absolutely secular, but there is a transcendent undercoat to a lot of this research, and I think that does show up, and it does make a difference, and it does matter, but when they're doing particular interventions, like when we do interventions with college students, as you know, college students are just having a terrible time now. It's very hard to be undergraduate on it. If any of you have children or grandchildren, or you teach at the university, you know that the students are under a lot of pressure right now. And so they're doing a lot of this kind of work. Well, they'll send them an email, think about something that you're grateful for. They tend not to want to activate people around sort of a religious or a transcendence thing, even though a lot of people may go there themselves. So I haven't seen the actual data about if you're grateful to God or if you're just grateful to all these other people, and make that connection. And I'm grateful to my wife, but I should be grateful to God for giving me the wife. The people that go that way. But my guess is that that's what the rabbi is going to talk about. Can I show my one last slide? Because I think it's a lead-in. And it also is a perfect for this question. And this is actually from Siddur Sim Shalom. And they actually have brachot of gratitude in the back of the little daily red book. So if any of you ever go to Minyan, those of you get assigned to go to Minyan. So if you go to that, and so Heschel is saying this exact issue, that the insight of wonder must be constantly kept alive, since there's need for daily wonder, there's need for daily worship. This is one of the goals of the Jewish way of living, to experience commonplace deeds as spiritual adventures, to feel the hidden love and wisdom in all things, that everything, as you properly said, everything goes back to God. And so I'll stop there, because I think Peter gave me I have 0 time left. So I think you're going to pull up another one, and then we can pull up the other questions.
First time, let's give Dennis a big round of applause. We're gonna switch to a different screen share. Bear with me for just a moment. How was last week's presentation? Oh, stand by. My flux capacitor is not fluxing correctly. Hold on. We had it set up, and yet here we are. Ah, there it is. Okay. So, same joke every week, the rebuttal. Okay. So I want to pick up on the piece of positive psychology that Dennis has been talking about, this idea of how we choose to live our lives has as Professor Rodko pointed out last week or 2 weeks ago, has an impact on how we see the world, and also the intention setting. We can choose to be someone who gives thanks, and how we can have some kind of agency. We can choose to surround ourselves with variables that create us and make us be the people that we want to be. So first off, you'll notice I gave us the term thanksgivers, because in many ways the Jewish people are supposed to be thanksgivers. This is taken from Genesis 29:35. This is the part of the Torah which discusses how Isaac and, Jacob, Rachel, and Leah, their three's company sort of experience, where Rachel is the more beloved wife and has trouble conceiving, and Leah seemingly is able to have child upon child. The text reads, Vataher vateled ben, that she conceived again and she bore a child, a son, and she declared, this time I will praise God's name, Yod-Heh Vav-Heh. Therefore she named him Judah, and there she stopped bearing kids. Right, so the name Yehuda, that child, comes from the same root word, which means to offer gratitude or praise. And ultimately, we, the Jewish people, are the descendants from this tribe, and so we are the descendant of the one who gives thanks. We are thanksgivers. We come from this root, Yud Daled Hey, and because of the way Hebrew conjugates, sometimes the Yud drops out, sometimes the Hey will leave us, right? But you have Yehuda, you have Yehudim, Jews, and so Jews, you could say, are thanksgivers. And one of the things that we do is we specialize in giving gratitude. We specialize in finding moments of expressing gratitude to, and I would say specifically, God. So the first thing you're supposed to say when you wake up, and I think we covered this, is Modeh ani lefanecha. And you see there that first word is connected to that Yud Daled Hey root. I thank you, living and eternal sovereign, for your kindness in restoring my soul. How great is your faithfulness. The first thing you do when you wake up isn't begrudgingly turn off your alarm or hit snooze, but you're meant to offer gratitude. And I will tell you, as a parent of 3 kids, this does make a difference in my life. I will tell you, there are days when my kids come and hit the bed or they wake me up, and they say, in my mind, they're saying, good morning, Poppy. It's so nice to see you. Thank you. It's right. What they're really saying is, can we go downstairs? I lost my stuffy. Right? And I tell myself in my mind, I hear it in my head, it is a blessing to wake up and to have kids to wake me up, and so I can get on with the work of my day. And that sort of shifts me from feeling ugh to a feeling of like what a gift it is to be alive. Birchot HaShachar. Every morning we sing Matovu, how nice it is to be in the sacred space. And then we move into a litany of brachot, recognizing the benefits that we have in our lives, the ability to distinguish between day and night, recognizing that we're created in God's image, who for giving us clothing, for giving us the ability to have the things that we need, not necessarily the things that we want, for giving us courage and strength. And so in the morning, already off the bat, several brachot trying to cultivate an attitude of gratitude. I want to share this part of the Talmud, Masechet Brachot, which presents another opportunity for gratitude. Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rav, 4 people need to offer thanksgiving. Those who traveled across the sea, those who crossed the wilderness, those who were sick and recovered, and those who were imprisoned and released. 4 specific types of situations where you are obligated to give thanks. And so the Gemara asks, well, what's the blessing you say in that particular instance? And Rabbi Yehuda says, right, blessed is God, who bestows acts of loving kindness. And here's what's really interesting. This is the bracha called benching gomel. Perhaps you've seen it done in the synagogue. It's in our Siddur. It's been expanded in scope a little bit. Again, the people who are obligated are one who crosses the sea, one who goes on a long journey, one who was sick and experienced healing, or one who, we expanded sometimes, who went through a scary situation and emerged free, and one who was incarcerated and became free. And what's really powerful about this blessing, first off, if you ever have a moment, we're very quick to say, oh, it's a Shechechianu moment, right? This is like a special moment. We should recognize it. We should infuse this moment with God's presence. But our tradition actually also says that in these moments when you've experienced salvation or you've come through a difficult situation, you are not only, we give you words and language to describe emerging from surgery, having recovered from a car accident, having survived a near-death experience, But Abaye says, and they must offer this before 10 people in the presence of a minyan. Ideally, the way we do this is during the Torah service. And what's really powerful is that it takes this personal feeling of gratitude that you have for yourself, and you actually share it with the community. And it's meant to be an interactive experience where the person, after taking their aliyah, says, Baruch atah Hashem Eloheinu, right? Our God, sovereign of time and space, who rewards the undeserving with goodness, and who has rewarded me with goodness. And then the congregation responds back to you, may the one who rewarded you with all goodness reward you with all goodness forever. And so all of a sudden, joy and gratitude isn't something that you experience as an individual, but it's meant to be experienced as a community. And so when we talk about expressing gratitude in others and feeling that gratitude, it brushes off on people and it perhaps impacts your neighbors. And so built into our sense of community of peoplehood is an opportunity to express gratitude for the things that we have. I'll also note, just a little thing for you to think about as you sit at your Seder tables, a beautiful teaching, which says that when you retell the story of Pesach, in a lot of ways, it covers all four of these situations, right? Crossing the Sea of Reeds, yes? Crossing the desert and making it to the land of Israel, right? We can expand the scope. We were sick and suffering in Egypt, and we emerged out of it in a better place, right? And obviously we were imprisoned, we were enslaved, and we became free. What's really powerful is if you look at the korban, the sacrifice that was made in the days of the temple for giving a thanksgiving, there's an actual sacrifice you could offer. Those sacrifices were offered with unleavened bread and offered with leavened bread. And so some commentators look at the fact that Pesach feels like we should be reciting benching Gomel. And the question is, in the days of the temple, when we made the sacrifice, we had leavened bread and unleavened bread. And what's the first question of Manishtana? Why on this night do we eat only unleavened bread? Something I'll let it sink in with you a little bit as you get to your Pesach Seder. For all the research currently being done in positive psychology, I do believe there is a lot to be said for placing ourselves in situations where gratitude is the expectation, where gratitude is just the overall experience of the community. And I think when we look at our prayer lives on Shabbat, weekday minyan, and you look at our prayer lives on Shabbat in many ways is nothing more than an opportunity to spend the day recognizing the blessings that we have. And so perhaps one of the insights Judaism can offer is that we are meant to be grateful. We are meant to offer gratitude. Diane, to your question about does it make a difference if you're offering gratitude to a person or does it have to be to God? I think building on Peter's presentation, one of the things that we looked at is that what Heschel would call the ineffable, right? To recognize that the world that we see is not the only world that exists, right? And so therefore, if I only express gratitude to the things that I can see and feel and touch and empirically know, then inherently I'm missing a part of the grand picture. I think Heschel would say that if you're offering gratitude for meeting a partner, gratitude for passing an exam, gratitude for having children, gratitude for having a great job, if you say, I'm going to thank the person who made that connection, I think you are reserving all of the variables in the world to only the things that you yourself can articulate and see. And I think our tradition wants us to realize there are things greater that we can't see. And so just to leave a little bit of room to give thanks for that experience or for that force that makes for that to happen. Does that help answer your question? I think why, I don't have scientific data, I don't have a study, but I think in our tradition, it would say you should thank the person, right? Because they're the action doer. But you should also leave room for the part that we don't fully understand, that we can't see, touch, or feel, and express gratitude for that as well. And I think that's one of the things that we specialize in.
I think the person in front who I can't even see, so I can't say by name.
Sure.
Who added the point of the wife was, you thank the wife for breakfast or whatever she made, but you also thank God for helping you find the wife.
I-
It goes back to, I'll call it, the initial act that led to the chain where the wife made the breakfast.
So you can go. A lot of Jewish philosophers ultimately say God is responsible for everything because God was the first mover, and so therefore, right, anything that happens, if I'm the one picking up this cup, ultimately God created the world that helped produce that cup. God produced my great-great-great-great-grandparent, right? Like it goes on and on. So therefore, God can be said to be the first mover of all of this, and therefore all gratitude goes to God. But I think if you err only on that side, you also realize that like what we do matters, right? I'll end with this, and I don't think I shared this story with those who are gathered here, but if I did, you'll just get to hear it again. When I was, my parents are, my dad in particular, he places everything is meant to be. Everything is meant to be. And so when I was going through the job search 4 years ago, my mom and my dad both said to me, Michael, don't stress so much. What's meant to be is meant to be. If you're supposed to be in Providence, you'll end up there. If you're supposed to be somewhere else, you'll end up there. And finally, that always rubs me the wrong way. And so I finally said to my parents, well, if it's just going to happen, I might as well not even apply. And they'll just call me and say, here's the job, right? And so I think, again, to this question, right? I think it is possible to say two things can be true, right? We can give gratitude to, in my case, in this case, the search process that enabled me to be here and the people on the search committee and the research I did, right? We can thank all of that. And I can also say I'm thankful that it also worked out.
The microphone just shut off.
Oh. And I can also be thankful that it all worked out the way it did. And there are variables. I can't thank every single person who brought me here to this moment, but I can thank the world that exists that enabled me to reach this moment. And in some ways, that is the Shechachianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. So with that, we're going to turn on the lights, and we're going to do a little bit of a Q&A. If you have a question, feel free to raise your hand, ask your questions. 1 second, Alan. We're going to raise our hands. We're going to give people like 15 seconds just to think of what they want to ask, and if they can ask their question without a 3-minute intro, I think we would certainly appreciate it. We'll ask Dennis to come forward. All right. Bob, go ahead. Bob Lando, you have the first question.
Thank you very much. This was very interesting. And I certainly appreciate the importance of gratitude, but I think the picture of free will is broader and versus determinism than gratitude. So I'm curious sort of where you stand on the broader question of determinism versus free will and any other broader principles or points we can make other than sort of focusing so much on gratitude. Not to minimize it, but there's more to it than that.
There's, I guess I'm going to use this. There's absolutely more to it than that. And it was a choice, a reductionistic choice, because it's something that's currently hot in the empirical literature and all that. So absolutely, just even in positive psychology, there are lots of other variables that are being looked at. There's a lot of empiricism. It's 45 minutes. So you're absolutely right that we shouldn't reduce it to gratitude, and that the world's really, really, really complex. In terms of my personal opinion, I taught theories for 32 years to graduate students, and not once did I ever tell them what my opinion was. I went in every week and argued the case. I'm a little uncomfortable like saying that, but I think even if we just have 1% choice, it makes all the difference in the world. And so I think that the reason that I showed them that evolutionary psychology has a lot to say, that Skinner had a lot to say, that the cognitive psychologists have a lot to say, that Freud had a lot to say. Everybody's right. Everybody's right, and everybody's incomplete. But at the end of the day, and it might just be, my wife and I were in graduate school together, and we were taught by Sartrean approach, and you have choice. That at the end of the day, you have a choice, and I think that makes all the difference. You may not use that choice, or it might be too frightening to make that choice. But I don't know, I'm sort of in this Holocaust kick, because we just went to something last week and we're going to something today. But there were people who made that, not many, who made the choice to save Jews. There were. And that was, and the research is really interesting on rescuers. Because they're Christian, some of the researchers, they're not the loudest at church, they were the person who just said, no, that's just wrong, and I'm not gonna do that. I'm just not gonna do that. Against all the pressure, that it really was just this sense. So I would say I come down in a belief of choice, and from a psychology perspective, that's probably what I would say. And then as you got kind of with Peter and I are also Heschel groupies. So, from the religious side is all Heschel. But I think that that's where I come down personally. I think you were.
I'm wondering if you believe, or if the research would show that gratitude is sustainable. So if we could teach our kids every morning to wake up and then as the rabbi said, to say something about, I'm grateful to wake up.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, they could say something that they were grateful for. Are they happier as people when they get older?
Yeah. Peter and I had this friend back at Syracuse, and he said, the reason that you have to, they put in, you have to go to Minyan 3 times a day. It's like 3 times a day, saying the exact same things. He goes, people are kind of forgetful. And so, not to step on the rabbi's idea here, but the rabbis got that you don't just do it once, or you don't do it for 5 weeks. That we often. I'm really plugging Minion here, so
but you're not going to get a disagreement from me. So
right.
Like
my wife and I are Minion regulars, and in our synagogue, there are a lot of people who come for the 11 months. I understand that that's a tradition here, that people feel very strongly about coming and saying Kaddish, and they come for 11 months, and then we have, we used to do it in person. It's now sort of hybrid, but we'd have an event and they'd say, this was just so important to me to come, and it was so meaningful for me to come, and I really got a lot from it, both in terms of the mourning of their parent, but also just their life's better, so they have all those positive outcomes, and they say, I'm going to keep doing this, and then they never do. So it's why the tradition said, the bare minimum, 1 day a week, can't you think about something other than work? Can't you turn off your phone like 1 day a week? It's like, so did that sort of go where you were going?
No, so I have to say that my father was missing in action in World War II, and he was found at the end of Battle of the Bulge. He was found emaciated. He was came home on a stretcher, and every time we ate, it's not that we would necessarily say blessings, but he would always say how grateful he was. He was buttering toast, and he would say, thank goodness, thank God for this toast. He had 4 children. And when I was growing up, it was sort of like, at a certain point in my teens, I thought it was a little petty, but I realized that I also, with my family, I just thought it was normal when you eat that you thank whoever it is who prepared it, and you enjoy the meal. And I thought it was a Jewish thing, whatever. And then I moved out into the world and saw that people just don't do that. And my father was just so gracious, grateful to be alive and to be able to butter toast for his children. And, then I was able to, when I matured, to appreciate that and pass that down to my kids. And when we eat together and family, whatever, that whole gratitude thing is very, very important. It makes you enjoy your meal and being with people. So.
Yeah, I'm sorry for the people on Zoom that you couldn't quite hear that, but was this it? a very important story about that we just have so much and we never say thank you. I mean, it's just unbelievable. So that does happen.
But I want to add to that one thing.
You want to? Okay.
There is also a habit, I think. Nobody would... If I were to say, how many of you feel grateful for what you have? Raise your hands. How many of you feel... Everyone feels grateful, right? I would never be ungrateful for all the blessings in my life, right? But the challenge is, how do you keep cultivating it? And is being grateful something that you're one and done? Or is it an evolving thing that you're constantly working on? And I think that's like one of the interesting challenges. It's like someone says, I don't need to go to learn anymore. Like, I don't need to do Jewish adult learning because I already know everything, right? Like, I've learned everything, right? Right? I don't need to do Musar work, Jewish ethics. I'm already nice. I'm already kind. I'm already thoughtful. Like, and to imagine that there's any part of you that's not kind and thoughtful and grateful and generous and all of that feels like almost insulting to who we are. But what I think our tradition does is it actually says you can always be more grateful, right? You can always be kinder to those who are around you. And I think whether it's minyan or learning or whatever we're Jewish ritual we're looking at is meant to make that the dialogue. I can't help but think that, yesterday there was this national, I don't know if people heard, there was a National Day of Hate. And I remember thinking to myself, like, they don't have anything better to do, right? They don't have anything better to do than to do this. And so imagine if there was a culture where, like, all you did was focus on being nicer, right? And being kinder. It sounds cliche or maybe too cheesy and it gives you cavities because it sounds so sweet, right? But, like, imagine, and I think it's Harold Kushner who told this story. It's like, imagine, you can put a TV show where in an hour they solve the mystery, right? Who robbed, who stole, who murdered. In 1 hour, you solve the case. Imagine if, like, the TV show instead was like, someone did something really thoughtful. They dropped off a meal at someone's house. And there was a new, they were sick and they came home and they dropped off a meal. Imagine if there was a TV show where it was like, who did it? Right? And that was the case. They went on, they're like, Peter, where were you yesterday? And you're like, oh, I was in the kitchen. You got me, right? Right? I think that's part of what we're supposed to do, right? Part of what we're supposed to do is cultivate that gratitude. And I do think, to quote Heschel, right, to cultivate this sense of awe in the world around us. Alan, go ahead. You have a question?
Dr. Gilbride?
Yeah, come over. Yeah, go ahead. You can ask your question. He's right here. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Did you ever read books written by Daniel T. Beck, psychologist of Philadelphia?
Who?
Dr. Aaron T. Beck.
Beck. Yes. Oh, absolutely.
He's
yes.
my first cousin.
Wow.
He just passed away 2 years in Philly.
So we got Yichus here in the room. This is...
He used to run it with his daughter.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Next question. Yeah.
The metaphor that was occurring to me is of architecture, that the society we're in, our genetic predisposition is like the building that we work in and live in, and we can try to buck it, we can sleep in the kitchen, or we can use the bathroom in the bedroom, but it just doesn't benefit us to, so we sort of kids are greased for us to do what we do where we're supposed to do it, and that's how I think of free will.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. Could be. Natural consequences and things
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
A Maslow opinion here?
The world that we live in is not the only world that exists. About 60 or so years ago, Maslow did what I thought was really revolutionary, because he looked farther than pathological to normal. He looked beyond normal to self-actualizing, loving, and I'm really interested in what you think about the new research on psychedelics and what that speaks to in regard to our own agency from that place of awareness.
Well, that's a really interesting question. And
Can you summarize it? Yeah.
So wanting to know my opinion about psychedelics and how that affects transcendence, and so worrying about accessing transcendence, or
well, we have agency from our own place of being culturally and educationally influenced from a place of being opened up, from that place that research in the last 15 years have shown us.
Right.
What does agency look like from that place
Right.
to make us human?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question and way outside of my expertise. and I think I'm too old to even have an opinion. You know, I don't see us doing it, honey. You think? What's that?
They're doing it in California.
I know. So we actually have some friends who are still in California who are moving in that direction. So we're hearing about it. I personally am much more interested in being embedded in a long-term, deep, functional meaning system, which shows up in the Siddur. So that's like good enough for me. So that's kind of where I go. I can see it. So it feels dangerous to me, personally.
Victoria, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I teach a drugs and behavior course, and we talk about psychedelics a lot. I wouldn't say I'm a huge expert in it, and I personally haven't even experienced myself, but I do think that there is a lot of promise in that research. You know, in my talk, I talked about what sets humans apart, and I even thought about introducing psychedelics because I think it's a really interesting research area. So what sets humans apart, I would say, is everything I talked about with being able to take control of our habits, and the fact that we have a greater repertoire of mental states. And I think that this is what psychedelics get to. So there's this theory of entropy, which is kind of like disorder in the brain, and so there's these high entropy states that is a lot of child development is about. I don't know if anybody has heard about this high and low entropy mental state hypothesis, but there is a high entropy, which is like magical thinking, being on psychedelics, very open pathways, and then there's a low entropy state, which is always going down the same ski slopes, right? And so rigid thinking, there's theories of mental illness that these rigid thinkings, OCD, depression, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, are a byproduct of this rigid thinking. And so the idea with psychedelics is it can kind of take you from this very low entropy, rigid thinking state to sort of shaking up the snow globe, washing the mountain clean so that you can go down different ski slopes, and kind of opening things up, accessing the unconscious. So there's a lot of really interesting things there that I think are powerful. I think it's very hard to quantify. There are, a questionnaire of mystical experiences, and for addiction, transcendence, coping with dying, depression, anxiety. It seems like it is promising, but I think that there's still a lot of research that needs to be done.
The other piece of this is that there's a long-term effect of the psychedelic experience that's being looked at, that's being researched, that there are neuronal changes that affect alcoholism or depression or patients who have terminal illness, that a year later someone is still not drinking from an 8-hour experience on psilocybin. That's powerful.
I certainly wouldn't be opposed to biological interventions that work, that are managed. I'm a conservative guy, so it's like, cocaine worked too. Cocaine does work too for a lot of people. So, but I don't mean to dismiss it or think it. It's way outside.
We'll take one final question, and then we're going to wrap up.
I just want to make it very simple. I think there'd be a lot more happiness if, like, let's say a young couple really want to buy a house, and God is good, and they find the house, and now it's Sunday, and the guy has to mow the lawn, and he goes, oh, I don't feel like mowing the lawn, or he could just say, God, I'm so grateful you answered our prayers. And think of all the homeless people. And it would just be so easy to recognize all the good things in your life and shut everything else out.
I wouldn't disagree with you there.
Right.
But so first off, can we give Professor Gilbride a big round of applause? I want to share our next presentation will take place in a couple of weeks. It will be on standby. March 19th. This is going to be our final. We're having a keynote address by Rabbi Jason Rubenstein, who designed the curriculum that we're reading on Tuesday nights in our free will prophecy class, Jewish free will and prophecy class. Brunch will be at 10:30. He'll present frontally from about 11 to about 11:40. We're going to have a moderated discussion from 11:40 to 12 o'clock, where our three previous speakers will have a chance. I'll ask questions, and we'll be able to hear different perspectives from our four panelists. Then we'll have an audience Q&A, and then I will wrap up the series. I'll give you a little bit of a teaser that I think one of the things we'd like to try to do is ask for volunteers to participate in probably a 2-week, I'm not going to call it an experiment, but a 2-week experience about gratitude, about changing habits, changing behaviors, and see how you can use your human agency to have the outcomes that you desire. John, to your question, maybe the next Sinai and Synapses series, we'll call it Sinai and Synapses and Psychedelics. It'll be a 1-hour session that lasts 3 weeks. It'll be I think we are beginning to scratch the surface, right? I hope it's one of these things I will say, like, as soon as you are able to definitively answer this question, I feel like you're missing the whole point of the experience, right? But I hope that as we go through this process, and for our last lecture in a couple of weeks, you'll ask yourself, like, what am I capable of, right? In a positive way, hopefully, right? What am I capable of? What do I have agency to do? And how do we leverage what we know about neuroscience and physics and psychology so that I can be the person that I want to be, that I can help build the world that I want to build, and ultimately see and build that world of our dreams. With that, thank you very much for being here. I know Professor Gilbride can answer a couple questions privately. Thank you very much, everyone.